Welcome to Player Prop Picks with the professor. There's a lot of P's there. The show where a real statistics professor gives you player prop tips. I'm your host, Professor Sides. In this episode of Major League Baseball props, I will discuss 5 picks I think make for good bets for games scheduled to be played tonight, Friday, June 23rd, 2023. Remember, if you're interested in full game projections and picks for every single game, you can get that on Dub Club. That link is in the show description. Costs under $1 per day. You'll get money line, run line, totals, prices needed for A grade picks, and exclusive access to the Discord chat where we have a lot of fun, talk about a lot of bets, look out for each other about boosts that are happening and line movements, all sorts of good stuff in that community. Again, I think it'll be worth your while. Give it a trial. Link in the show description for that under $1 per day. Remember that sports are unpredictable, so the discussion on this show projects a typical game and does not try to forecast it to a T, as it'd be a foolish and impossible goal. And I realize that as we start talking about player props, you know, it gets a little bit tougher because you kind of are making a little bit more predictions. I can kind of get away from, hey, I'm not trying to predict exactly how the game's going to go. We talk about full game because we all know some guys are going to do well, some are bad, and it might balance out a little bit. When you talk about player props, there's no one there to pick up the slack but him, right? If he struggles in one at bat, he better figure it out the next at bat or vice versa, right? Um, again, I'm not trying to predict exactly what will happen. Again, we're talking about looking at probabilities, looking at prices. I don't know exactly what will happen with the. I'm not trying to forecast if some guys get a home run. I have no idea if he will. But when you're looking at props, you're saying what's the probability that he hits a home run, and then he does or he doesn't. But it's a good pick if the long term probability is better than the price. That's what makes it a good pick. And I know some of you are like, it's a good pick if it wins. Look, the more you do this, the more you realize you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and the price is what's going to make you successful or not. And that's what we're talking about here. So as I'm always saying, we're gonna have some good variance and bad variance. And while the long-run profitability of my methods has been proven, unfortunately, we cannot guarantee winning every single day. Remember that Thrive Fantasy is an official partner of Picks with the Professor. The first 4 picks that I'm going to talk about here are available on Thrive Fantasy. You can put all 4 of those into a parlay and get a huge payout if all 4 hit, or you can only choose 2 of them or 3 of them. You can do 2 things of 2 on them. Sign up today. If you haven't, you can get a first deposit match of up to $250, 100% deposit match if you use the promo code SIDES or the sign up link in the show description. Either one is fine. They also have a benefit for new users. Take advantage of this. So if you sign up today and play, you can get basically a free winner. Today's free prop is Joe Musgrove over half a strikeout. He should get at least one, right? So it's a kind of an extra boost for your first game. So today's a great opportunity, if you haven't already, to join Thrive Fantasy and take advantage of what should be that sure winner there in your first pick. Also, I'm going to be using Outlier.bet again today, official partner of Picks with the Professor. They integrate seamlessly with your favorite domestic sports book. You can shop for the best prices. We'll also see the latest trends and analyzing all the relevant data. I'm going to show you the trends and kind of how I came up with these picks. Really relied on them very heavily today as I did last time. Sign up today at Outlier.bet/professor. Again, that link's also in the show description. You get a 7-day free trial to check them out. So without further ado, let's get to it here. Going to start off with Spencer Steer over 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBI. First off, we've got a very hitter-friendly ballpark there in Cincinnati. And if you've watched the show, you know that I think very little of today's starter for Atlanta. Model does not like him whatsoever. He's done okay, I guess, in his first couple starts. I think he's been real lucky. I'm looking to fade him in as many ways possible and back these red hot Reds as much as possible, right? So, you don't want to go overboard. You don't want to pick every single team prop inside or whatever, because with all these bets are kind of correlated. So, I've already got a little bit here on on the Reds to win, got a little bit on the over already, kind of discussed that. I think there's some good value in that. There's another opportunity here, I think, in Spencer Steer over hits plus runs plus RBI. Again, this is available over on Thrive Fantasy. And you can see the price here at minus 115. So our break-even point is 53%. And if you just start off, look, boom, 56% of the time he hits it this season. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? Last year, you can see in 2022, right here, he only at 46% of the time. Young guy, right? I believe last year was his rookie year. Um, you know, what kind of sample size is this? He only came up in September, right? But this year has been more of a full time guy. You can scroll down and see a number of plate appearances here. Only one of these here was a pinch hit appearance. This one, either got pulled or pinch hit either way. But for the most part, playing a lot, not a pinch hit type guy, really thriving in this role. There's a lot of talk about Ellie De La Cruz for good reason, and some of these, a lot of different Reds. I don't hear as much about Steer, but he's quietly putting together a really solid year. And again, he's hit this 56% of the time. He's been doing it here about half the time over his last 20. And so, I always say you can't throw out irrelevant data pieces. We want to use all the data to our advantage. And so kind of saying what's happened in his last 20 probably matters a little bit more than before. Some kind of truth between this 50 and 56% is probably where the truth lies of his true hit rate here, against an average pitcher. And so you say, okay, but between those 53%, that's a break-even proposition while I'm playing it, because that's, again, against all of these teams and a bunch of average pitchers. And I don't think that's what he's going to have here against the Braves. Playing at home helps out, because with hits plus runs plus RBIs, playing in a smaller park matters. So obviously a home run, does it for you. A double either likely drives in a run or puts you in scoring position. I think the team's going to score a lot of runs. That's going to give him more at-bats, more opportunity. So the fact that it's a home game in a small park helps, and a bad starting pitcher. Now, of course, Braves relievers are pretty good, so we are looking for him to get this done in his first couple of at-bats. But I think the Reds are going to score plenty early, which makes this a pretty strong pick in my opinion. I'm also going to take Brandon Belt over 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs. I like this hits plus runs plus RBI thing better than some of the other props out there, because it's more of a it's a little bit like more of a sample size thing. It's not obviously more at bats, but you have more ways that you can get there. And so it's going to be a little bit less variable than if you're talking about a home run prop and a home run props and stolen base props. And if you're just doing like runs or something, right? Those are fun, obviously. But it's harder to feel like you're going to profit off of those long-term, because they're just so variable, bouncy back and forth. It's hard to figure out if you're even doing well or not on them. And that's why I like this hits plus runs plus RBI thing. Brandon Belt here, you can see in his last 20 games has hit 50% of the time. Here on this one, I'm going to go over at minus 120. And you might say, hey, wait a minute, if he's only going over 50% of the time, minus 120 isn't good. Minus 120 break even point is 54.5%, I believe. 50% isn't there. Well, of course, you have to look at the opponent here. He's playing Oakland. He's playing Oakland's weakest starting pitcher, and James Caprelli. And Oakland relievers are terrible as well. And so if this was a normal opponent, I would not be playing this at minus 120. But against the A's, I think it's a little bit of a different story. Also, being home helps. Brandon Belt is a guy who does have some pinch hit risk, as you can see here. Only 2 plate appearances here in this one, because he's a lefty. He's facing a righty today. I don't think the pinch hit part will matter. I don't see a single lefty reliever in the A's bullpen that scares me. And on top of that, I think the Blue Jays kind of get a bunch of runs early, kind of run away with this one. At that point, if he gets pinch hit for it, it's probably because they have a ton of runs. If they have a ton of runs, this has got a really good shot of already hitting, because he's probably been right in the middle of all this with how well he's been doing as of late. You can see for the season, only 37%. Look at all these here at the beginning, really did not do well for the month of April. It was not a good month for him, but you can see as we really turn the calendar here to May, right around, Cinco de Mayo, right? They were off on Cinco de Mayo. And then after that, apparently he had a lot of margaritas and tacos. I don't know, Texas boy, I guess, and doing really well here now since then. And so I'm looking kind of to ride the hot hand, and again, combine that with, I think the over makes a lot of sense in this one. I think the Blue Jays make a lot of sense in this one. So this is a way to get a little bit more down on that with the guy that's going to be right in the middle of that lineup, a lefty bat against a righty who's struggling, and saying, I think that even though, he's trending the right direction, 6 out of his last 10 hitting this, and I think he's going to get the opportunities, and I think the Blue Jays score a lot of runs. And so as you can kind of see in these first 2 picks that I've made, what I'm doing is I'm trying to identify situations. We've got players who are doing well and are in favorable situations to either continue that or do better than they've been doing, because of the fact that the model likes this team to succeed and or likes a lot of runs, which is the case in both of these first two games. Let's get some under action here, though. Obviously, under is a situation where there's a lot of value usually in unders because people like to play overs all the time. So here's an under for you here. Willie Thomas under 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBIs. This one it might be my favorite. I'm a little bit confused as to you know why why this is here at -110. Adames was fantastic last year, and you can see that. And we can't ignore this, but you can see that he hit over 53% of the time. We hit the under only 47% of the time. Everyone knows he was like the catalyst to that offense last year and really helped make them respectable, make them decent. This year, the Brewers' offense has been terrible, and partially because he's been terrible, been out for a little bit as well. But for the most part, you can see here you see a lot of ones and zeros. And my first thought on when I see these zeros is like, well, was this situation where he just wasn't playing those games? All those zeros all correlate here with 4 plate appearances. I mean, this is 0 for 4, not just 0 for 4, batting. All these 0 for 4s are not just zero hits, but no runs and no RBI. And maybe he's walking a little bit there. Don't have to care on this prop. Only one of these situations was a pinch hit. Every other situation, he's been getting plenty of at-bats. He just hasn't done well. And here's the kicker on this. He's facing Shane Bieber, who I talked about. I don't really know where to put Bieber at this point. The velocity's down a little bit. The underlying metrics are much worse than last year, but I still think he's an above average pitcher. He's starting to look better. I think you can come up with a lot of different viewpoints on Shane Bieber at this point. And that's why I'm not touching a Shane Bieber prop specifically, because I really don't know. It's one of those where, he's starting to look a little bit better. Maybe he's starting to round into form from last year. Maybe that's just a couple of good games, and maybe this down velocity, maybe he isn't as good. But the range of outcomes is Shane Bieber somewhere between good and great. Even if the underlying metrics aren't as good this year, he's still good. He's still an above average pitcher. An above average pitcher, like, let's stop and think about that phrase, above average. Well, average is what you face over the course of the season. So on average, the average pitcher that Adames has faced, he hasn't been doing this. He hasn't been hitting the ball very well. And Shane Bieber, worst case, is an above average pitcher. He might be a really good pitcher at this point. It's really hard to say. I'm really curious. He's definitely not a guy I've got my eye on to try to figure out going forward. But if he's barely above average, this is going to have a hard time. Adames is going to have a hard time doing anything off of him. If he's really good, then he's even going to have a harder time. I like the under in this game. We're going to have a relatively chilly night in Cleveland, especially for June. Wind, slight breeze blowing in. It just sets up to be a situation where, I'm already back in the Guardians, already eyeing the under here. So the kind of intersection of that is fading someone here on the Brewers, and with how disappointing Adames has been. Again, we can't ignore what he did last year, but, so if this was against a normal pitcher, I might be a little bit more hesitant on this one, but going up against a guy like Bieber, who I still at least think is somewhere at least good or better, this under 1.5 here, I think is a pretty strong player prop here for Friday night. And one more hitter prop here for you. Jake Cronenworth under 1.5 hits plus runs plus RBI. This is a guy on my fantasy roster, my fantasy team, and it's been a disappointing season for him, to say the least. You can see here he's only gone over this 1.5, 42% of the time, gone under 58% of the time. Even last year, for the most part, was going under this. He had a real hot stretch here, as you can see in the summer, and then was kind of, decent, but still for the most part, a lot of these, one hit games or one run games, that sort of thing. When you look at this year too, the same thing. I'm coming down here. He's a guy who plays every day, it seems like, and doesn't, it doesn't get pinch hit for. And, so he's going to be out there. So it's not like he's got a lot of ones and zeros because of pinch hitting appearances, that sort of thing. He's not like he's getting pulled early a ton. You can see a few situations here with 3 at-bats. My hunch is either, 8 to 6 here on a 3 plate appearance game. Might have come out injured on that one. I can't remember specifically, but for the most part here, he's getting his 4 at-bats on average. And so he's getting the plate appearances. He just hasn't done very well. He's a lefty going up against a lefty in Patrick Corbin. And as I mentioned before, I think Corbin is just a little bit undervalued here. If anybody's going to take advantage of Corbin, I think it's going to be probably more likely the right-handed bats, like a Tatis, in that lineup. But a lefty here in Cronenworth, I think, is probably not as likely to succeed. You do have the risk that he just doesn't play today, being a lefty on a lefty. That is something to keep an eye on. So maybe it doesn't start, and so that might be something to keep an eye on. But I mean, for the most part here, you can see, I mean, he's been playing even against lefties. You could see, you could see this year versus left-handed pitching. Cronenworth down here, 88 at bats, right here. So, or maybe you can't see it. My face is above it. So, let me, there we go. Look. All right, here we go. Jay Cronenworth, 88 at bats here, against left-handed pitching. So I mean, he's playing. So I mean, there is the risk, of course, that he doesn't start. So if you're concerned about that, wait till starting lineups are announced before you lock this one in, just in case. That affects anything, because if he doesn't start, he may not pitch hit. And at that point, you just get a push, right? But I mean, otherwise, there's not really a lot of risk in this from that standpoint. Y'all know I love unders in San Diego, cooler weather here on a night game in June. So this is a good way to kind of fade the Padres bats. One of the isolated lefty, one of the more mediocre lefties. I don't want to fade Soto because he's just been on fire as of late. Been one of the few hitters for them that's been really good here this last, month and a half. So Cronenworth under, I think, makes a lot of sense. Lefty on the lefty. Night for pitchers to succeed, and a guy who hasn't really been that good this year. I don't know why tonight would be the night he really changes that. So Cronenworth under, again, a pretty good pick there in San Diego. And those would be my four that I would do on Thrive if I was looking for a four-player parlay. This one's not available over on Thrive, but I want to mention it here for those of you who are betting it, the FanDuels and the DraftKings of the world. Patrick Sandoval, I love this one here, under 4.5 strikeouts. You can see here, this is one that Outlier notes as a plus expected value pick, only about 2% expected value. Anytime you got a pitcher in Coors, though, it makes the math really difficult because it's such a unicorn park. The spin is different, and a lot of pitchers really struggle there. So I'm going to analyze this first apart from Coors Field, and then I'm going to talk about why I like it even more because of Coors. If you just look for the season here, he's gone under this number 54% of the time. This translates to, what do we have, a sample of 13 or so? So it's probably like 6 of 13. He's gone over. 7 of 13 he's gone under, so pretty 50-50 right on around this 4.5 number. But notice that under 4.5 we're getting plus 118 on it. So if this hits 50% of the time at plus 118, we're looking really good. So I mean, just aside from Coors Field, if this is 50-50, hallelujah. Now, you do look last year. Last year, he had a whole lot more strikeouts. But notice this last year, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, was doing better last year, was pitching deeper into these games. We got a handful of 7s and some 9s. This year, not looking quite as strong. No 9s, only 3 7s. Hasn't been as good of a pitcher this year. So even if we always talk about the truth is somewhere between the two, if we aggregate this data, again, we're looking somewhere around 50%, maybe just under 50% for this one, which makes plus 118 a pretty solid investment. But of course, the kicker on this one is, as we know, this game is being played at Coors Field, and some pitchers handle it okay. And it's not just some pitchers. Some pitchers, like one start, handle it okay, and the next they don't. It's very weird to pitch in that altitude with what happens to the ball. You can get like BABIP'd to death in that park because it is so big in the outfield that even aside from the ball carrying, you can just get singled to death, doubled to death, and even, of course, tripled because it's so big. If the ball bounces around out there, it gives guys all day to run around. So it's just really difficult to play that park. And you know that well, that there's like an extra 10% chance that Sandoval gets run in like the third inning. And I'm not saying I think that will or won't happen. I'm just saying there's an extra chance that he gets just destroyed at some point, second, third, fourth inning. And if he doesn't make it very deep in this game, it's going to make it hard for him to get strikeouts. It's harder to get strikeouts there because the spin is a little bit affected by the altitude. Your breaking stuff isn't as sharp. That makes you less likely to have strikeouts. So that's why a lot of times if I think a guy might be in trouble, I like to go under on the outs. But in this case, under on the strikeouts, I think makes a little bit more sense because they're so highly correlated, but B, with the spin being a little bit affected by the altitude, it's going to be harder for him to get strikeouts. That makes his job, if he's not getting strikeouts, tougher, more likely to get hit hard, pulled, and then again, he can't get the strikeouts because he's not getting the out. So there's just a lot of ways this can go really well for us, even if he goes 6 innings. he's still 50-50, maybe barely better than 50% to win this. So plus 118 offers of straight value. And then we always have in our back pocket the possibility this game gets wild and he gets pulled early. And if so, then the under 4.5 looks even better. So plus money on this one, I think makes a lot of sense. And that's all I've got for you here on this edition of Player Prop Picks with the Professor. Hopefully some of these hit for you, and I will see y'all later.